Hello everyone. If a presentation goes bad that you're doing live, it's not a problem to just record this presentation again like I'm doing now. It's quite a bit different when your Active Directory goes down. That hurts much more. We're going to talk about a real live incident, in this case, Talent Back recovering Active Directory during a cyber attack. My name is Guido Grillenmeier, Principal Technologist at Semperis, and that's what we do. We're all about protecting your identities. And if Active Directory isn't secure, nothing is. Basically, Active Directory is one of those core infrastructure and security technologies in your environment that is ingrained in the majority of your business apps and, in the meantime, also into your cloud. So this situation that you're seeing here, the graphic displays a hybrid setup between customers with an on-prem Active Directory that are also hosting cloud applications, and they're synchronizing their on-prem Active Directory users and groups, etc., memberships and everything into the Microsoft Entra ID tenant, into their tenant. That is a mechanism that is very common to use Office 365 and many other applications to then use single sign-on from the cloud to those applications, to those cloud applications. Of course, depending on your configuration of that integration, you might even have issues with cloud access if your on-prem Active Directory is down. So it's very important to take this topic serious, and that is what Gartner has also realized. Gartner has made identity threat detection and response, in short ITDR, a key topic of interest for CISOs and companies to make sure that they take this serious. Identity is a key vector for threat actors to go after once your identities are compromised. If that's not secure, then nothing is. And your Active Directory is in the middle of that and has been for many, many years. Windows 2000 was the version of Windows that brought Active Directory to life, and it's pretty much a quarter of a century ago. We just have to think about that. Computer technology, 25 years of age, that is something that hasn't survived for most of other technologies that you're running. Active Directory with that is one of those most successful server features that Microsoft has ever developed. And they had further developed it over the years with the different Windows operating system releases. 2008, 2008 that brought a lot of new capabilities also from a backup and recovery perspective at the object level with the recycle bin. 2012 then finally gave you an UI for the recycle bin, and up to 2016 Microsoft invested a lot of effort into updating AD and bringing new features, but since then nothing much happened. Basically Microsoft said, hey, we want everybody up into the cloud, we want everybody to adopt Azure, and that hasn't happened that way. Companies need to have basically the choice, and many will utilize on-prem Active Directory for years to come. That hybrid setup will be something that is used for many, many more years, and some companies may even remain on-prem. Think of your factories that might have a separate AD environment, because Active Directory has been reliable. It can fail over, but eventually Microsoft realized they do have to put more focus back on Active Directory. That's why with Server 2025, that's going to be released sometime this year. I expect it in maybe October or November. Microsoft has added new capabilities to that. For example, database updates that are not going to be most critical for everyone, but for those that are running Active Directory at really large scale, increasing the page sizes for the attributes, meaning that much more data per attribute can be stored in an Active Directory. You can only reach that with the newest force function level then, with that is coming with Server 2025. Until now, your latest function level that hopefully most of you are running in is Windows Server 2016. There hasn't been anything new in 19 and 2022. So with 2025, there are updates that Microsoft is giving. Also on the security side, but let's be clear, what we're talking about today would have not been prevented after an update to Server 2025 either, once it's released. Nonetheless, an important OS release, and it shows the focus that Microsoft is giving this technology, ensuring that it's going to be supported for many more years to come. That is something that will be of interest, of course, to those that need it, but it also gives you a sign that moving everything to the cloud might just not be the path forward for everyone. And that's exactly also what Microsoft has realized. And with that, let's discuss how a ransomware attack typically happens. So on the left side here, you have a phase of those two left blocks, the initial access and the post exploit. Basically, the initial access is where somebody gets into your environment and has access to one of your corporate clients in your corporate network. And that still today often happens through phishing mails that, of course, thanks to AI, are getting more and more realistic and fool more people. Malicious websites, the same, but attackers also use stolen credentials. They even buy them in the dark web. So post-exploit phase is when they then download malware that they would then use in the reconnaissance phase. Those systems that have that type of malware on them, they are called the command and control systems. And often intruders build many of those out if one should go down. So they even build resilience for their remote access. And they even sell that in the dark web basically as ransomware as a service. So you do have those initial access brokers that get that access, that get that initial foothold in an environment, and then they sell that for others to go after the actual attack, like an Amazon marketplace. By the way, they don't only exploit operating system level vulnerabilities, they also go after drivers. So this bring your own VD is not bring your own device, but bring your own vulnerable driver. Should you not patch them correctly, they're easily exploited by the intruders. In the next phase, of course, remember they're on a normal system. They're typically not finding a client that a domain admin is logged on. Should not be the case, and that's for sure. But they're a normal non-privileged user, and then they want to get after your Active Directory since it does hold the keys to your kingdom. It is granting the permissions to all your business data, to your HR, to your customer data. And so once they breach the Active Directory, that they gain domain dominance or the whole force in their control, that's where Active Directory is. And that's through phase. It's basically a tool that the intruders use to get to the core of your environment, which is to extract that data, and in worst case, at the end, of course, to add more pressure to make you pay the ransom, is to encrypt everything. And I've seen it in many, many ways, encrypting everything individually or just taking down all VMware farms. In any case, your backups, your snapshots, whatever they can reach online will then be destructed at the same time. So even for a proper recovery of anything, you should make sure that you do have backups offline somewhere so that you can start any recovery, especially the recovery of Active Directory, since that will be an enabler for you to recover anything else. If your Active Directory isn't running, the majority of your other infrastructure service will have an issue, and of course the business apps, and that will make it hard for you to get your business back up and running. And so that's why we're focusing on what is it like if an Active Directory is completely breached, how can you get out of that? And that's what we're going to have a look at with a real life example. The victim in our example is actually a company from the Middle East, and was a provider of critical infrastructure in that country because it's a telco provider. And any telco provider is, of course, something that many companies rely on. And in this case, also, it's a microbanking system. So lots of payments are being done through the phone systems. And in this environment, they had 1,000 servers and even more 1,000 OT endpoints. And a lot of the infrastructure is still physical. That's not so important for our breach scenario, but of course, the more virtualized you are, the easier it is to react on bringing up new systems and being able to work against those systems to bring them in a safe zone, change virtual networks and whatnot. In any case, even here, it is nothing that a single team can necessarily manage. We were working together with a client of ours, with a partner of ours, Q Group, also hosted in Germany, like I am myself. So they called upon us after they were engaged through the German government. Basically, that company had reached out differently to people to say, hey, we've been breached, we've noticed something weird going on in our environment, we need help, and it was key to keep them alive. So Q Group was already analyzing this environment and realized that, the domain has already been completely compromised. There's weird stuff happening with domain admin credentials. The intruders had already extracted the KRB TGT account, which is basically the account used to sign Kerberos tokens, and they were able to generate their own golden tickets to just do anything in the environment. And at that stage, Qubit said, okay, we have to have a more competent partner on the AD side involved with us. They are experts in the analysis of network traces, in the analysis of malicious actions happening on the endpoints. They're working with Sentinel-1 for a lot of their work, and the AD pod is just so special that they said, okay, for this activity, it would be great to have a partner on our side that is specialized in this, and they called upon Semperis to help out to basically ensure that we can help them. And we actually had multiple attackers in that environment, and this is basically something that we're going to talk through here in this incident. So this is a real life incident. We're going to go through it step by step and picture the scenario. You've been breached. What's the first thing that you need to do? We came in and the Active Directory was completely in the hands of the intruders. So we had to decide, wait a second, we don't know if they have any useful backups or not. Are they full of malware? How long have the intruders been in there? So the first thing that we were inclined to do is to perform a backup of our own. So we decided to spin up a new system in the still compromised environment and implemented a separate Active Directory forest recovery server into that environment to perform a backup of that environment of the Active Directory forest, so that we were sure that we were able to perform that recovery. So the first thing that we started to do is to spin up a safety net for Active Directory. We spun up a separate Active Directory forced recovery system, non-domain joined in the compromised environment, hours after coming into this environment, after they built up a new system. And basically we were able to take a backup of their Active Directory, because it was something where we do not back up the operating system. So we can safely take the backup even of a compromised environment. Then we took it into an isolated network and recovered on free, malware-free new systems with a clean operating system that of course was trustworthy, and just brought the Active Directory back. Other tools like Windows Server Backup or let's say your classic server backup tools would grab a backup of the whole system, including the operating system files. Be it a bare metal recovery system or even just the system state backup. That is something that takes a lot of operating system files, DLLs, etc. along. And with ADFR, we also back up sysvol that could contain malware. That is where your group policies reside. That's what attackers often use to distribute group use group policies to distribute malware. And all of those executable files we basically contain within the recovery into that clean environment, that they are quarantined and can be checked for any malware, but no active malware is active anymore in that environment. So that's something that we concentrated on, and were able to basically get back that Active Directory in a clean state, in a trustworthy state, because nobody knew. Are those intruders going to be active to maybe fully encrypt everything? Is this something that we won't have a clean backup then? So to ensure that we have an Active Directory available for any case, we performed that backup, not knowing yet how bad it really is in the compromised environment, how easy we can potentially fix that. So that was, of course, the next thing that we needed to concentrate on. And that's what we then did. We then went back into the compromised network. We left the isolated network as it were, and reconnected into the compromised network to perform a vulnerability analysis, a deep dive vulnerability analysis. A high level had already been performed. Now we used a variety of tools, including those that we provide free ourselves, like Purple Knight, very powerful vulnerability scanning tool that has the ability to find misconfigurations and potential indicators of exposure or indicators of compromise in an Active Directory environment. At that time, this was a few months back, we still use Certify to check out certificates. All of that technology has already made it into Purple Knight these days, all those checks. And Bloodhound was used to analyze the environment's attack path. In the meantime, Semperis has also released for free Forest Druid that allows to do that same attack path analysis in an even easier way for defenders. So Bloodhound, very powerful. We were using it at that time to understand what was actually going on in the environment. Like, how bad is it? And this is something where you have to, of course, analyze it and come to a conclusion. Can we fix it live? Can we go after it and fix it in place to ensure that the intruders are basically taken out? And I'm going to show a few of those examples of the findings that we've had now, just to give you an example of how bad it was. But you have to imagine that overall, this was like a red Christmas tree blinking with many, many beautiful lights, but they're not so beautiful if they're blinking red and it's a report for the vulnerabilities in your environment. In this case, domain computers were allowed to change certificate templates. That's what that warning is about: dangerous control path exposed certificate templates. So here, any intruder that was getting hold of any computer that was domain joined was able, once of course they have system level access, which is not hard to reach on a system that you basically are on, then the intruders were enabled to basically create their own authentication certificates for any user. That could have also been a domain admin and anything. So of course, a bad configuration, often misconfigured by administrators that actually just want to enable those domain computers to self-enroll certificates. They do not need the permission to change the certificates, of course. And the next more or less entertaining thing we found was that in this company, a special help desk account was used. Actually bad already, because you should use a help desk group, and every help desk user has their own account that is added to the group. In this case, they had an account, a shared account, and it's not a surprise that that was allowed to reset password of everyone in the domain. But then the everyone group, actually it's a well-known security principle, that was permissioned to reset the password of the help desk account. And you know, it's like having a bad self-service reset, self-service password reset in your environment. Not really good. Our metadata analysis basically did show that that was a reset, that permission on that help desk account was set sometimes 3 weeks before that, before we came in. So that could have been an intruder setting a stealthy backdoor, or a mistake by an administrator. That's something that we couldn't know. But in any case, multiple attackers were active at the same time in that environment. We found 4 fingerprints of well-known malicious actors, and basically it was fully in the control of those, and the victim actually only noticed something was weird that was going on because of performance issues on their systems when those intruders retrieved data from those systems. Of course, you cannot bring back stolen data, so that's nothing that anybody could promise to you, but ideally you have your offline backups, and please do not pay for that data to not be exposed. You've already lost it. If you pay for it once, attackers are going to come back and ask for you to pay again, because, well, that's where the money is, and this is all about the money. They're making a living out of this, yeah. So your job is to protect your environment. Their job is to attack it, and it's always a race. So ideally, you're better prepared than the attackers, and you prevent any of those extractions, of course. But in this case, this company at that time didn't have any prevention mechanisms. They didn't have Semperis Directory Services Protector that would have warned them of say malicious activity going on. They didn't have an EDR system on their endpoints to help them. So in any case, the vulnerability analysis basically came to the conclusion, dear customer, we can't help you to fix your environment if you don't go offline. So that would have been, of course, our preferences. Take everything completely offline in production, then we can fix your Active Directory in production. But we cannot do it live. The intruders will notice that we cannot fix so many holes at once, both at the network layer, at the endpoint layer, and in Active Directory. It would be visible to the intruders that we're doing this, and then the risk, of course, of them overreacting and encrypting everything is very high. So we basically came up with a, let's say, pretty, I should say, special plan that we basically concentrate on recovering the Active Directory on and cleaning the Active Directory in the recovered environment in that isolated network. The client took the decision that they couldn't go offline, and it's something that you would have to think about yourself. How do you do that? They wanted to continue to use that compromised Active Directory until the weekend. That weekend, this was in the Middle East, would start on our Friday. So that was, good from the perspective of having all people on deck and available. But of course, that recovered Active Directory inside was still contaminated. So a lot of work was needed to harden that, to make it clean, to make it trustworthy. And one of the tools that we offer from Semperis to help our customers that are ADFR customers or our partners that work with us is an additional version of Purple Knight that is basically a post-breach edition that has the capability to go into the metadata and analyze that and give us more information on, let's say, stealthy information, stealthy changes that might have happened in the environment, even after, not after the backup, but before it was backed up, so that, of course, in the recovered Active Directory, these stealthy permissions and objects would also be there. So that is an additional feature that we offer to go dive deeper, because of course in this case we're running Purple Knight, this post-breach edition, with highest privileges to understand what's going on. We check the metadata in the environment. That's not done with a free version. You typically run it as a non-privileged user, because you actually want to see your Active Directory through the eyes of the intruder. In this case, with the post-breach edition, we're able to dig deep, and of course additional scripts and just simply knowledge of how Active Directory works was used to continue with a hardening of that environment. And what we actually worked on is covered here in the slide that I titled AD Hardening Speedway, it was all about getting a proper tiering infrastructure in place. This customer, a victim back then, now a trusted customer of ours that is using our tools, didn't have any tiering in their environment. And the tiering has maybe come out of being modern, but not at all. It's not necessarily something that Microsoft markets much anymore, since that ISAE model, what was it called, Enterprise Security Administration Environment, something like that, is no longer marketed by Microsoft because it was complex and essentially expensive. But even without a separate so-called red force, a separate domain that you use to put your privileged accounts and manage that other domain, even without that, just ensuring that your domain administrators are the only ones that can reach domain controllers and other critical servers, like, for example, your Azure AD Connect or Intra AD Connect system that synchronizes your accounts from your on-prem AD to the cloud, must be considered and basically categorized as a tier 0 object. Domain controllers, those systems, and domain admin groups, and any other privileged groups that has access to those objects. That could also include group policy objects that configure one of your members of a domain admin group, because whoever can configure that group policy basically has the power to do anything on that domain administrator. So all of those need to be figured out, and again, for Extrude helps doing that, figuring out what are those relationships to your most important objects. And this didn't exist. The victim at that time was using their domain admins. If a help desk operator needed more support on it, even on an end client, the domain admin would log on with their domain admin credentials. And that, of course, is the worst thing that you can do, because that is very easy to grab that hash or even the Kerberos token of the domain admin to then elevate their privileges and do whatever they want, the intruders that has malware on one of those clients. So that's why you have to have a tiering model. Even today, ensure that you have that. Tier 0 is the most critical one with the domain and privileged account objects. Tier 1 are your application servers. By the way, even SCCM, if you're using it to deploy software or updates or anything like that, don't bind it from tier 1 also into your tier 0. Your domain administrators are responsible to patch your domain controllers. Maybe have a separate WSUS system available for your tier 0 systems. Don't share it with your tier 1 and tier 2 systems, because it's again another vector of attack into that tier 0. So in our case, we built a minimalistic tiering model for this client, which also means that even if it's the same person that is operating in tier 0, tier 1, tier 2, they get separate administrative accounts in these tiers. And of course, don't share the password between these, so that those users would never log on to a tier that they don't belong to. That's the important part that can be ensured through group policy, updates, denying access here and there. Of course, authorization policies and authorization silos that you have available, even since Server 2012 R2 as well. So it is a while that these capabilities are there, but they're not used so widely. Protected Users Group is also available for many years now, and it's also not used so widely, but of course very critical to do that and give that access to your actually add your privileged accounts to that group. Service principals, basically service accounts with an SPN attached, with a service principal attached, were ensured that none of them were privileged anymore. That means taken out of domain admins. SCCM was such an example, and ensured that they couldn't be used for against Kerber roasting and using that password of that account. Any SPN is subject to Kerber roasting, but once that if such an account was captured, you can mitigate the blast radius by ensuring that it's not doesn't have any access to a tier 0 object. So a lot of work was done in restructuring the OU permissions and doing those GPO updates to ensure that we do have a proper tiering system. Of course, we couldn't implement MFA in such a short time. Like I said, 1.5 days. That's a job that we did afterwards. But in any case, something that I can only emphasize here, that if anything protects you best, it is investing into tiering. And Directory Services Protector can keep that tiering in place, can warn you if anything is done on the permission level of those OUs. Force Druid can help you to understand what are those relationships that might also be wrong, what you need to change. Like I said, other service accounts that might have access to tier 0 objects, you need to find those, and then you need to either decide, okay, I need to change something in my infrastructure, or you simply remove the permission and do other things manually in that tier 0. That's worthwhile. Treat your tier 0, your domain controllers and your domain administrators and any other privileged account as your most important asset in your infrastructure. That is how you best protect your Active Directory. And with it, of course, your business. So after we had hardened everything, it was the next hardest step that we basically had to perform, because now it was all about getting back into production. So phase 4 is about bringing that hardened Active Directory back into production. And I'm telling you, it was a very hard thing for me to basically take that call and discuss with the CEO and the CISO. Now is the moment. Now you have to shut down all of your production domain controllers and trust us that we bring a hardened, clean, and trustworthy Active Directory back into production to basically bring security back into your environment. Now, typically, you don't have to make that choice. If you are in this situation and you have been completely breached, quite likely the intruders would have wiped all of your environment already, and then the only choice that you have is to bring it back from building new systems and recovering those and bringing those back to production. But if it's still running, it's a hard decision to make. And I'm telling you, stressful moment, that's for sure. You have to picture such a shutdown and then bringing Active Directory back from the isolated environment into the production environment. It's like operating on an open heart. Yeah. And we basically had to ensure that this goes quick. It was, of course, very well prepared. All the methods of re-IPing and changing the VLANs of the systems back into the production mode, ensuring that DNS was reconfigured again properly. All of that was, of course, detailed in the smallest little steps that needed to be performed so that the cutover could be done in the shortest time possible. Nonetheless, it really did feel like what this picture is showing here. People really do this. They change the tires while driving, and don't forget this was in the Middle East, so that's where you have a lot of straight roads with deserts around it. So this is where I guess this is a pastime of them. Certainly entertaining to watch. But when you do this during a recovery of Active Directory, it's not necessarily that entertaining. It was a lot of coordinated efforts that needed to be performed precisely in the right order to switch that recovered Active Directory back into the production network. As I mentioned, it was a tough decision, but of course, once that decision is done, you execute. And we changed the VLANs. Those domain controllers were also the DNS servers. A lot of companies are using 80 integrated DNS, so nothing too special here. And basically, we were done with all of that cutover within 30 minutes. So just picture that. The company basically was only down for 30 minutes. In parallel, a lot of activities were, of course, done through the Q group, through the EDR team, that took down more than 20 command and control systems, which deliberately hadn't been touched until then to not make the malicious guys nervous and maybe potentially overreact. Hundreds of external IPs were blocked, and that was all done together in that coordinated effort, so that the attackers were completely surprised. We basically took the breath out of their attack. Yeah, picture activities going down that were high before that, and then malicious activity basically dropped down to zero after we were able to do this coordinated effort together. ADFR already took care of all those tedious steps that you would otherwise have to have performed manually if you did follow the Microsoft Forced Recovery white paper, which of course is an important white paper to have available, but it's like 29 complicated steps to ensure that your Active Directory is safe and secure. RID pool that needs to be disabled and refreshed, global catalogs that need to be rebuilt, and of course that key distribution center password that needs to be reset twice. All of that had been taken care of by ADFR automatically, and would have been taken days if you didn't have that level of automation. Here, the timeline all complete with all the actions taken. I'm telling you, this is a story that I'll probably still tell my grandchildren one day. It's been a wild ride. We were very successful in this. I wouldn't recommend it as a path forward. I would always go for taking down your production network. But can you really do that? It really depends on your business. Maybe you would have been in the same situation and you would have had to keep running and take that risk. And that is a really tough decision to make. I'm telling you, I am glad that I didn't have to make that decision. This absolutely was a decision that had to be made by the customer because he took that risk. In our case, the most important outcome, of course, here was a very fast recovery of a fully functional and safe Active Directory. No more pawn privileged accounts were available for the attackers to leverage. And in the end, even their Entra ID, which by the way hadn't been breached, and they were lucky with that, their pass-through authentication for Office 365 and any other cloud applications still worked. Now, beware that pass-through authentication is not a good configuration. We also changed that later because basically if your Active Directory had been gone, if it was completely wiped, then even cloud access would not have worked. Because in this case, with pass-through authentication, it's the on-prem Active Directory that decides is the credential that a user is entering in your cloud application when they authenticate, is that okay or not, and basically answers that question. And if it can't answer because it's down, then you don't have cloud access either. So that goes for federation as well, at least if you federate through ADFS. That's what's still being used in many companies. So your Active Directory is even more important also for your cloud access. So think about it, at least have a backup plan. You can sync the passwords of your cloud identities and still, for whatever reason, prefer to not use it and federate. But then in case that you did have an issue with AD, you could switch with proper commands in the cloud to utilizing those password hashes and allow the users to log on with a password directly in the cloud in case of an on-prem disaster. So syncing the password hash is always recommended. It's actually a hash of a hash. You're not synchronizing any clear text passwords here. So clearly a recommendation. And in this case, after this incident was over, we basically literally helped them to survive. Of course, we had additional work with them afterwards to tighten down a little bit more different aspects of their environment. That did include switching to synchronizing the passwords and not using pass-through authentication to get less dependency of their on-prem Active Directory. In any case, it's something that you have to be prepared for. It's disasters. If disasters strike, you want to bring back your Active Directory as fast as possible because the recovery of the Active Directory is also an enabler for the recovery of your business applications. If your AD is down, a lot of your business won't function. You have to be prepared for that. You have to know your dependencies, and that's where also our free tools help. Purple Knight, I mentioned it already, that we used it in this incident, has of course grown and has more than 150 tests in the meantime for indicators of exposure and indicators of compromise. Free to use, just like Forest Druid is free to use, powerful tool for visualizing attack path, and it's made for the defenders. It's easy to use. You can target what are your tier 0 objects, what are those that you need to protect, and really an eye-opener for that, to understand how you should basically build out your infrastructure to protect it. So those tools are for free. Of course, we've got professional tools to help you. ADFR was mentioned. Directory Services Protector would protect your Active Directory continuously by actually scanning for any change, and but it's also just being prepared for the recovery with processes, ensuring that you can recover your environment, that you know who to call, that you know what dependencies of applications you have, who are your most critical users. It's not just the recovery activity itself, it's also the preparation. How do you communicate, etc. So offline communication, that's what I meant in this case. If you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always there to help you. We also have an incident response team, of course, specifically for identity protection. And even if you are working and are unsure how to support yourself, and if you are breached, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We do have a breach and response tab on the website semperis.com, where you can reach out and get in touch with us to be helped. So thanks a lot for your attention, and stay safe.